Hello, guys, and you're welcome back to the Git series with Data Doctor. And today we'll be, discussing the Git config command, the Git configuration. So after understanding, the basic Bash commands, it's then up next is the Git configuration. The first time you set up Git on your laptop, you need some initial configuration like your name, your email address, your default branch, your editor, and the likes. So the command to use is the git config command, right? So the git config command. So let's go straight without much further ado. Let's start configuring our name, username, editor, and what else? Anything that can be configurable, right? And also note that um, if it's a new, if you're just installing your GitHub on your laptop, then you'll be doing this. However, for me, in my case, this is not my first time I'm using GitHub on this laptop. So in my case, if I input any name, right, different from what I have before, what's going to happen is that it's going to change or it's going to overwrite the configuration that we have already. So like I said, it is git config. Oh, sorry. So it is git config. That's what I'm going to use. Now, the way we go is the configuration I want to use is a global one. So say double dash global. So what do we want? Then we say the user dot. So let's configure username, right? So user dot name. Then you put the name in parentheses. I mean apostrophe. What's it called now? So let me call my own data underscore doctor. I don't know. I think I used full doctor. So let's see what happens. So that's configured, right? It's as simple as that. Up next, let's configure email. So we say git config, okay, global, the same syntax. Then you say user, okay, dot what? Dot email, right? Then you put the email. I'm not sure now if the email will be in apostrophe or not. I don't know. What do I do now? Let's just put it there. Let me just try without apostrophe. Korea 16. That's gmail.com. Let's see. Yeah, that works. Korea 16 at gmail.com. So next, let's configure. I mentioned editor, right? So let's configure our editor. Now, so what's an editor, right? So an editor is and before I go there, it's usually advisable that the username and the email you want to configure on your Git should be the same thing as what you configured or you have in your GitHub account, right? So you don't want any, you don't want any inconsistencies, right? So it's just advisable, right? And also when we want to configure the Git editor. Okay, so when you want to, what's a Git editor? So a Git editor is just like a normal editor that you have on your laptop, the notepad or whatever. It also helps you to write your Git message or any other thing you want to write. So I mean, it's just nice to configure it. And the way to configure that is, I mean, there are various Git editors. We've got Nano, there's Vim, there's just a lot, there's Emacs and the like. So the way to configure it, we use the same git con, config. Okay, then I would do global, but now we say the core dot editor. Okay, core dot editor, then nano. So nano is an editor, right? So we do that, and that is configured, right? And that's basically it. Okay. Now next is you will also want to configure your default branch. Remember in the introductory episode that I mentioned that your default branch or your main branch or master branches, whatever changes you that you are the owner of the repository, whatever changes you make directly goes to your master branch. Okay, though you can decide where to go to, but it goes directly to your master branch. And when you create a new repo on your laptop, okay, it goes to initialize with a specific branch name, which might be different from the branch name that you have on GitHub, on your GitHub account. So by default, on your GitHub account, the branch name, your default branch name, is actually the main. So it's also nice to configure that here as main. So let's just do that. So anytime you push to the main branch, you know what you are doing, right? So we say git again, git config, mm-hmm, global, is that it? Global. Then we say init dot, mm-hmm, default branch. Okay, the name default brand. Then what name do we call it? So let's call it main, which is the name, the same name with what we have on our GitHub, and that is it. That's all about the GitHub configuration. And after doing that, you will want to see those configuration all together. You want to check a list of the configuration. So a way to do that is to do git config and I think list, and let's see what happens. Amazing. So you can see all our configuration, even the ones you didn't configure. But let's go to the ones that concern us here. We have you can see the init default branch is master or main. The user email is prayer 16 for me. My username is data doctor. So initially data doctor we have here was actually doctor, but with what I've done here, it overwrites it. Like I mentioned, the editor nano, the default branch is main. One other thing before we move on is that um, all these settings, all this configuration are usually automatically stored in a particular file, right? They are stored in a particular file called the git config file, the .git config file. So another way to approach it is we can say cat. Okay, cat means open. Cat means display what's the content of a folder or content of a file or something, right? So we can say cat tilde. So we want to check that git config file. Say git config. That's the name of the file, and let's check it. Can you see now? So this gives you the user email, the username, the editor, and the default branch that you have just configured. So this basically git configuration. Up next would be how to initialize a Git project.